What's up, YouTube? Welcome to my first album review. Today I want to talk about De La Soul's Buhloone Mindstate. This album dropped on September 21st, 1993. It was their third album and the last to be produced by Prince Paul. I feel like I should point out that probably like most of you, I wasn't really familiar with De La's work until recently, and finally it was all released on streaming. It felt like this was never going to happen. It took years for De La to clear their samples and work out deals that everyone was happy with. But the time has come. So, even though De La's music is new to me, I've been a fan of native tongue since I was a kid, so this album feels like I've known it my entire life. I love 90s hip-hop. I was born in the 80s, so it basically was the soundtrack for my teenage years. I have great respect for the hip-hop that came out before it. The path it was on through the 70s and 80s leads us to hip-hop in its most perfect form, and I don't think that will ever be surpassed. A Tribe Called Quest is my favorite hip-hop group of all time, and if you're watching this video, they're probably high up on your list as well. Midnight Marauders is one of my Desert Island albums. It came out less than 2 months after Buhloone Mindstate, and I think these two albums share a lot of common ground. I inevitably compare all hip-hop to A Tribe Called Quest, so keep that in mind as we go through the review. Quick side note, Buhloone Mindstate came out the same day as another one of my favorite albums, Nirvana's In Utero. What a day! I always associate In Utero with Midnight Marauders. Let me explain. When I was in 8th grade, we took a family trip down to Orlando. I was given both albums right before we left, and I listened to them each for the first time on the flight down from New Jersey. I was completely blown away. Those two tapes and my Walkman did not leave my side for the entire trip. So now, every time I think of Florida, I'm reminded of Midnight Marauders and In Utero. And every time I think of those two albums, I'm reminded of Florida. Weird. So let's get to the review. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on who appears on what track, lyrical content, what's being sampled, those sorts of things. To me, it's all about how it comes together as an album and how it makes me feel. That being said, I should mention that this album features horns by Maceo Parker, Fred Wesley, and Pee Wee Ellis, who were all part of James Brown's band in the 1960s. Boy, can these guys wail. I know it's kind of weird to start my review with De La's third album instead of, say, like 3 Feet High and Rising or De La Soul is Dead, but Buhloone Mindstate really did it for me. So this is where I'm starting. I feel like De La's first two albums were a bit more primitive, a bit more 80s, and with Buhloone Mindstate, they really perfect their sound. 90s hip-hop has arrived, and I am so down. Another thing that separates Buhloone Mindstate from De La's first two albums is its sparse use of skits. I don't really like skits. I find they always take me out of the experience. This album hits a great balance where there's still skits, but you're never taken off the ride. I can't stress enough just how polished this album sounds. It's so focused, it's so jazzy. De La knew exactly what they wanted, and they were not messing around. The production on this one feels way more sparse, and the instrumentation seems quite stripped down. You basically just get drums, bass, keys, horns, and vocals. It creates such a sense of space, and it often feels dreamy. The tracks manage to feel driving and upbeat, and also mellow and cool at the same time. Is this magic? We kick it off with the aptly titled track, Intro. Intro starts with the sound of a balloon being blown up, cleverly poking at the album's title. We are then immediately introduced to the sonic vibes that we will be riding for the remainder of this journey. Intro contains musical and lyrical bits that pop up throughout the tracks, cleverly tying the entire album together.
It might blow up, but it won't go.
Eye Patch, the second track of the album, kicks right in and shows us what's up.
Mess up my mind, mess up my mind, mess up my mind with the eye patch.
Just about every track on the album could have been a single, and Eye Patch does not disappoint. You get a dope groove and a great hook. And really, what else do you need? With our first thematic callback of the album, Eye Patch references the intro, and I am so stoked. In Focus, the third track, is another banger of a song that really keeps the party going. To me, the backing track feels kind of heavy, almost like something Wu-Tang might have used on an album like 36 Chambers.
You go eat meat, son, shit. I can't cook, but be a cooker serving much to eat.
I personally prefer the songs with a more jazzy vibe, but it doesn't suck to have a few driving tracks on the album that just don't mess around. Within Focus, we get a few more musical and lyrical tie-ins with the intro track.
I dig it, I dug it, I dig it, I dug it.
I know I keep bringing this up, but I really love when an album uses bits like this to tie the entire project together. It really does it for me to think that the artist sees the album as a whole and not just a compilation of disjointed tracks. Next up is Patti Dooke.
Mash it up, the one with the beat. Mega mustache, the beat. Deep under.
I get such Tribe vibes off of this one. The instrumentation on this song is just about as good as it gets. The drums, bass, organ, and flute all play off of each other perfectly. If this song doesn't make you shake your booty, I don't know what will. We get a sample from Run DMC's Rock Box, which a couple years later the Pharcyde will use on their Dilla-produced hit, Runnin'.
Running through the trenches, running through the trenches, running through the trenches, it's the Patti Dooke.
Quick side note, the Pharcyde is amazing. If you love Tribe and De La, you will absolutely love the Pharcyde's first two albums, Bizarre Ride 2 and Lab Cabin California. Patti Dooke once again goes back to lyrics from the intro. It might blow up, but it won't go pop.
It might blow up, but it won't go pop. It might blow up, but it won't go pop.
It does it for me every time. The fifth track, I Be Blowin', is an instrumental. The main draw here is the saxophone part, played by Maceo Parker. I don't normally like the saxophone. I think it was way overused by yacht rock bands in the 80s. If it's not George Michael's Careless Whisperer, I'm gonna have to give a hard pass. That being said, there is so much soul and feel on this track. I could listen to Maceo play the saxophone all day long. The sparse instrumentation here really lets the saxophone do its thing, and it's so chill. This one also gives me really big Tribe vibes. Up next is Long Island Wildin'. It's a super short track, but I love the driving beat and fast tempo.
Oh yeah. Oh shit.
It's a great pick-me-up after the mellow vibes of I Be Blowin'. Also, Japanese rappers?
Yes, sure. We don't stop.
Bet you didn't see that one coming. I'm down, man. We now arrive at Ego Trippin' Part 2.
The answer to the riddle is me, and here's the question, who could be fresh?
This is the only song that I remember from my youth, so I'm probably a little biased in thinking that this is the best song on the album. Trugoy and Pasta Noose really shine here with their lyrics and their rhymes. There is no doubt that these are two of the greatest MCs of all time. Bonus points go out for the quick sample at the end from the Beastie Boys' Fight For Your Right.
Ego tripping down the fucking stairs.
The next track, Paul's Revenge, is the first real skit of the album. As I said earlier, I'm not a big fan of skits. While it may be short, it really takes me off the ride I've been on for the last 7 tracks. It's funny, but I could go without it. Luckily, we jump right back on with the next track, 3 Days Later. This is another killer track that gets us right back in the zone. The beats feel great and the horns are amazing.
Now come along, my children, come along. Come along, my children, come along.
Up next is Area. This is one of the two tracks that to me feels a little bit like filler.
One the jungle bro, the other question from Queens. Yet I had the matrix of the 516 in my jeans.
It's not that it's a bad song, it just feels kind of old. Like maybe it should have come out on 3 Feet High and Rising. This would be a great track by many other bands, but I don't think it compares to the rest of Buhloone Mindstate. I don't know that I would skip it, but I definitely find myself waiting for it to end. Lucky for us, Area is followed up by I Am IB. This song is as good as it gets.
I've always walked the right side of the road. If I wasn't making song, I wouldn't be a thug selling drugs.
We're given the backing track from IB Blowin', and really, who could be mad at those horns? The lyrics on this one are some of the greatest on the album. I Am IB is De La at their best, and this track is every bit as good as any of my favorite Tribe songs. This is why native tongues are so influential and so loved. Every time the next track, In the Woods, comes on, I'm reminded of Scenario, the final song from A Tribe Called Quest's The Low End Theory. This is another solid song with a killer beat, and like in Focus earlier, I get really heavy New York City vibes, and I am so here for that. Once again, I want to mention how great the horns are. They almost have a spooky feel, like they would be in an episode of The Twilight Zone. Speaking of spooky, the 13th track, Breakadawn, slaps so hard. It totally reminds me of the Low End Theory. As they do on so many other tracks, they manage to combine super dreamy laid-back vibes with a driving beat and an upbeat tempo, and it feels like magic. Once again, the drums, bass, and keys play off of each other so well. This song makes me feel like I'm driving around, it's gorgeous outside, the windows are down and the volume is up. I dare you to not like this track. Next up is the second standalone skit of the album, Dave Has a Problem. I could go without this track, but at least the driving drums keep the party alive. We've reached the final track of the album, Stone Age, featuring Biz Markie.
Man, I got beats up my sleeve like it would believe.
What you mean, Biz Markie? What you mean, Biz Markie?
This one feels a little old and hokey to me, like a holdover from 3 Feet High and Rising. I hate to call this track filler. It's not a bad song, it's just not good enough to close out such an incredible album. It lacks the instrumentation that's on so many of the other tracks. You really only get drums, bass, and vocals. I think this would have hit so much harder had it been moved up a little bit in the track listing. All in all, I think Buhloone Mindstate is one of the best hip-hop albums of all time. I am so grateful that it's now available on streaming, and it will most definitely remain in my rotation. So there it is, my first album review. I would love to do more reviews, so if there's an album you would like me to review, please leave it in the comments, and I will do my best to get on it. How do you feel about Buhloone Mindstate? Have you been into De La Soul for years, or are you just hearing them now for the first time? Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. This is Jay from Ingenious Devices. Be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes! Catch you later, YouTube.